My parents charged me rent from the age of 14 and told me I owed them for the crime of being born. I still remember the day my father sat me down at the kitchen table, a calculator and a yellow legal pad in front of him, explaining my debt with the same cold precision he used to calculate monthly expenses. "Let's be clear about something," he said, punching numbers into the calculator. "You think living here is free? Food costs money, electricity costs money, water costs money, the roof over your head costs money. But I'm 14, old enough to get a job, old enough to contribute, old enough to start paying back what you owe." What I owe. He slid the legal pad toward me. On it, he had itemized everything. The hospital bill from my birth, $4,700. Diapers and formula, $2,300. Clothing from ages 0 to 14, $8,400. Food, $31,200. Housing, $50,400. Utilities, $12,600. Miscellaneous expenses, $15,000. At the bottom, circled in red ink, $124,600. "That's what you owe us," my father said. "That's what it costs to raise you, and until that debt is paid, you don't get to keep a single dollar you earn." I stared at the number, trying to process what he was telling me. "I can't pay that. I'm 14. "Then I suggest you start working. You'll get a job. You'll hand over every paycheck, and maybe, if you work hard enough, you'll be debt-free by the time you're 30. "This isn't fair." "Fair?" My father laughed. "You think it was fair that we had to raise you? That we had to sacrifice our lives for a child we never wanted? Fair is you paying us back for every sleepless night, every dollar spent, every opportunity lost because you existed." He slammed his hand on the table. "You owe us for being born, and you will pay." My mother stood in the doorway watching. She said nothing, just like she always said nothing. That was the day I learned that my parents didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as a debt to be collected. My name is Vivienne Okafor. I'm 29 years old. I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to Robert and Sandra Okafor, though calling them parents feels like a lie. Parents love their children. Parents protect their children. Parents don't hand their children itemized bills for the cost of their existence. I'm going to tell you about the 8 years I spent as an indentured servant in my own home. And I'm going to tell you about what happened 7 years after I escaped. Because 7 years after I left with nothing but $43 and a bus ticket, a real estate agent knocked on my parents' door. And what he told them made my mother sit on the floor and cry. Let me tell you about those 8 years. At 14, I got my first job, washing dishes at a restaurant 3 blocks from our house. Minimum wage, 20 hours a week, the maximum allowed for someone my age. Every Friday, I would cash my paycheck at the check cashing place on the corner because my parents wouldn't let me open a bank account. And every Friday, my father would be waiting at home. "Hand it over," he would say, palm extended. I would give him the cash, every dollar. He would count it, write the amount in his ledger, and calculate how much I still owed. $124,427 remaining, he would announce. "At this rate, you'll be 40 before you're free." I worked through high school, dishwasher, then busboy, then server. I picked up extra shifts whenever I could, missing school events, missing time with friends, missing everything that makes adolescence bearable. It didn't matter. No matter how hard I worked, the debt never seemed to shrink because my father kept adding to it. "You used too much hot water this month. That's an extra $30. You ate more than your share at dinner. That's $50. You needed new shoes for school. That's $60 added to your total." Every expense, no matter how small, was tracked and added to my debt. By the time I was 18, the original $124,600 had grown to $147,000. I was going backward. I graduated high, school with a 3.8 GPA, but I couldn't go to college. "College is a luxury," my father said when I showed him the acceptance letter from the University of Wisconsin. "You haven't paid off what you owe for high school yet. Why would we invest more in someone who can't even pay their existing debts?" So I stayed home. I got a full-time job at a grocery store, working 40 hours a week, sometimes more. Every paycheck went to my parents. Every dollar, every cent. I wasn't allowed to have money of my own. I wasn't allowed to buy clothes or food or anything that wasn't pre-approved by my father. I wore hand-me-downs from thrift stores, clothes my mother selected, clothes that were always slightly too big or too small, clothes that marked me as poor even though I was earning $1,400 a month, none of which I ever saw. At 19, I asked my mother for help. It was late at night, after my father had gone to bed. She was sitting in the kitchen, drinking tea, staring at the wall the way she often did, vacant, hollow, like she had left her body years ago and never quite returned. "Mom," I whispered, sitting across from her, "this isn't right. What Dad is doing, charging me for being born, it's not legal. It's not normal." She looked at me with empty eyes. "Your father has his reasons." "What reasons? What possible reason justifies treating your daughter like a slave?" "You don't understand. When you were born, we had plans, dreams. And then you came, and everything changed." She took a sip of her tea. "You cost us everything, Vivian. Our marriage, our careers, our happiness. Is it so wrong to want some of that back?" "I didn't ask to be born." "No, but you were. And now you have to pay the price." She stood up and walked away, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the weight of her words. I cost them everything. I was the reason they were unhappy. I owed them for existing. For a long time, I believed it. But then I turned 22, and something inside me finally broke. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in March. I had been working double shifts for 2 weeks straight, trying to save for a winter coat. My old one had finally fallen apart, and Milwaukee winters are brutal. I had calculated exactly how much I needed, $87 for a decent coat from the thrift store. I asked my father if I could keep that much from my next paycheck. His answer was immediate. "No, but I need a coat. It's freezing." "Then wear layers. You don't get to spend money you owe us." "I've given you over $80,000 in the last 8 years. When will it be enough?" "When the debt is paid." "The debt keeps growing. No matter how much I give you, it's never enough." "Because you keep costing us money." He pointed at me with his pen. "You eat. You shower. You use electricity. Every day you exist, you accumulate more debt." "That's not how it works." "That's exactly how it works in this house." I felt something snap, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet click, like a lock finally turning. I wasn't going to convince him. I wasn't going to earn my freedom. I wasn't going to pay off a debt that would grow forever, no matter how hard I worked. The only way out was to leave, and I was going to leave. I spent the next 3 weeks planning. I couldn't save money. My father checked my purse every day, counted my tips, monitored everything, but I could hide small amounts in places he would never look. Under the insole of my work shoes, $5. Taped inside the battery compartment of my old flashlight, $10. Folded into the spine of a book he would never read, $15. Sewn into the hem of my uniform shirt, $13. $43 total. Not enough for a new life, but enough for a bus ticket out of Milwaukee. I researched Greyhound routes late at night, using the computer at the public library during my lunch breaks. I found the cheapest ticket to somewhere far away, Chicago, $28. That would leave me with $15 for food. It wasn't much, but it was freedom. The night I left was a Sunday. My parents were asleep. The house was quiet. I had packed everything I could carry in a single backpack, 2 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, my library card, and the $43 I had hidden over 3 weeks. I walked out the front door at 3 a.m. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked into the darkness down the street toward the bus station downtown. The bus to Chicago left at 5:15 a.m. I sat in the back watching Milwaukee disappear through the window, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 8 years. Hope. Terrifying, fragile hope. And beneath it, a promise I made to myself. I would never go back. No matter what happened, no matter how hard things got, I would never go back to that house. I would rather die free than live as their slave. My father's text arrived 6 hours later. I was in Chicago, sitting in the bus station, trying to figure out where to go next. My phone buzzed. The cheap prepaid phone I had bought with birthday money years ago, the one my parents didn't know about. The message was from my father. "You'll come crawling back in a week. You can't survive without us. When you do, the debt will have interest. I read it 3 times. Then I turned off the phone, and I never responded. The first year was brutal. I had no money, no job prospects, no place to live. I slept in shelters when I could get a bed, on the streets when I couldn't. I ate at soup kitchens and church pantries. I applied for every job I could find: fast food, retail, cleaning, anything. Most places wouldn't hire someone with no address, no references, no stable history. But I kept trying. I got a job at a convenience store. Night shift, minimum wage, dangerous neighborhood. The manager paid me under the table because I didn't have proper documentation of my work history. I slept in a storage closet in the back when he wasn't looking. I saved every penny I could. Within 3 months, I had enough for a room in a boarding house. $400 a month shared. Bathroom, no kitchen. But it was mine. My name on the door. My space. My freedom. I cried the first night I slept there. Not from sadness. From relief. For the first time in my life, no one was going to knock on my door and demand money. No one was going to tell me I owed them for existing. No one was going to treat me like a debt to be collected. I was free. The second year, I got a better job. A temp agency placed me in an office, filing, copying, basic administrative work. The pay was better, the hours were stable, and the people were kind. I learned everything I could. How to use spreadsheets, how to write professional emails, how to manage calendars and schedule meetings. I watched how the successful people in the office operated, how they spoke, how they dressed, how they carried themselves. And I imitated them. Within 6 months, the company hired me permanently. Within a year, I was promoted to executive assistant. Within 2 years, I was office manager. The third year, I started taking night classes, community college at first, basic business courses, accounting, marketing. I paid as I went, never taking on debt, never owing anyone anything. I graduated with an associate's degree and immediately enrolled in a bachelor's program, 4 years of night school while working full-time. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in finance. By my 5th year in Chicago, I was making $75,000 a year as a financial analyst at a real estate investment firm. By my 6th year, I had saved $50,000. By my 7th year, I had a plan. The firm I worked for specialized in distressed properties, homes in foreclosure, estates in probate, properties with complicated ownership situations. I learned the business inside and out. I learned how to identify undervalued properties. I learned how to negotiate with banks, with attorneys, with families who needed to sell quickly. I learned how to turn other people's misfortune into profit. It wasn't pretty work, but it was lucrative. And one day, while reviewing a batch of new listings, I saw a familiar address, 4847 Maple Street, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, my parents' house. I stared at the screen for a long time. The property was listed as pre-foreclosure. My parents had fallen behind on their mortgage payments, and the bank was preparing to take the house where I had grown up, the house where I had been treated like a slave, the house my parents had been so desperate to keep that they had stolen 8 years of my labor to pay for. They were losing it anyway. I pulled up the full file. My parents had taken out a second mortgage 7 years ago, right around the time I left. They had used the money to cover their expenses, apparently unable to survive without my forced labor subsidizing their lifestyle. They had been struggling ever since. Late payments, collection notices, failed attempts to refinance. The bank was done waiting. In 60 days, the house would be auctioned. I sat back in my chair and thought about what to do. The ethical thing would be nothing. Let the bank take the house. Let my parents face the consequences of their choices. Walk away and never look back. But that didn't feel like enough. Not after everything they had done to me. I wanted them to know. I wanted them to understand in the most concrete way possible what their worthless daughter had become. I picked up the phone and called our acquisitions department. "I want to buy this property," I said, "whatever it takes." 3 weeks later, I owned my childhood home. The bank was happy to sell. They wanted to get rid of the non-performing loan, and I offered a price that made the transaction easy. The title transferred to my name, Vivienne Okafor, the daughter who owed them $147,000 for being born, the daughter who was supposed to come crawling back in a week, the daughter who now owned the house they were about to lose. But I wasn't going to tell them myself. That would be too easy, too personal. Instead, I hired a real estate agent to deliver the news. The agent's name was Thomas Williams, a professional, experienced man who specialized in delivering difficult news to distressed homeowners. I gave him very specific instructions. Tell them the property has been purchased by the new owner. Tell them they have 60 days to vacate, and then give them this letter. The letter was simple. It contained one sentence and one number. The sentence, "This is what your daughter is worth." The number, the purchase price of the house, $287,000, more than double what they claimed I owed them, paid in cash, by the daughter they had treated like an indentured servant. Thomas Williams knocked on my parents' door on a Thursday afternoon. I wasn't there. I didn't want to be there. But I had asked Thomas to record the conversation, legal in Wisconsin with one-party consent, and Thomas had agreed. I've watched that recording more times than I should admit. The door opens. My father answers, looking older than I remembered, grayer, smaller. "Mr. Okafor, my name is Thomas Williams. I'm a real estate agent representing the new owner of this property." "New owner? What are you talking about? This is my house." "I'm afraid not, sir. The bank sold this property 3 weeks ago. You're no longer the legal owner." "That's impossible. We've been working with the bank." "The bank sold the non-performing loan. The new owner paid off the mortgage in full. You have 60 days to vacate the premises." My father's face went through a transformation. Confusion, denial, anger, fear. "Who bought my house? I want to talk to them. We can work something out." The new owner wished to remain anonymous, but they did ask me to deliver this letter. Thomas handed over the envelope. My father tore it open. He read the letter. I watched the color drain from his face. "Sandra!" he called, his voice cracking. "Sandra, come here." My mother appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "What is it? What's wrong?" It's Vivian." "Vivian? What about her?" My father handed her the letter. She read it, and then she sat down, right there, on the floor of the entryway, and she started to cry. Not quiet tears, deep, racking sobs that shook her whole body. "She bought our house," my mother wailed. "Our daughter bought our house. She owns it. She owns everything." My father just stood there, staring at the letter, his mouth moving but no words coming out. "The amount," he finally managed. "The purchase price. It's more than what you claimed she owed you?" Thomas asked. I had briefed him on the history. "Yes, considerably more. The new owner wanted to make sure you understood exactly what you had lost. But she was supposed to. She couldn't even survive without you?" Thomas smiled. "It appears she did more than survive, Mr. Okafor. It appears she thrived." He left them there. My father frozen, my mother crying on the floor, both of them finally understanding what they had done, what they had lost, who I had become. I gave them 30 days instead of 60, not out of cruelty, out of impatience. I wanted them gone. I wanted them out of my house, and it was my house now, legally and completely, so I could decide what to do with it. They fought, of course. My father tried to hire a lawyer, but no lawyer would take a case with no merit. He tried to claim squatters' rights, but those don't apply when you've been given proper notice. He tried to reach out to me directly, but I had changed my number years ago and left no forwarding address. He couldn't find me. He couldn't fight me. He could only leave. On the 30th day, a moving truck pulled up to 4847 Maple Street. I wasn't there. I watched through the security cameras I had installed the week before. My parents loaded their belongings with the slow, defeated movements of people who have lost everything. My mother cried the entire time. My father moved, like a man in a trance, carrying boxes to the truck without really seeing them. When the last box was loaded, my father stood on the porch one final time. He looked at the house he had raised me in, the house he had used as leverage to steal my labor, the house he had lost because he couldn't manage his finances without exploiting his daughter. And then he looked directly at the security camera. He knew I was watching. "Vivienne," he said, his voice captured clearly by the microphone, "if you're listening, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything now. I know I can't undo what I did, but I'm sorry." My mother appeared beside him. "Please," she said, her voice raw from crying. Please let us talk to you. Let us explain. We can be better. We can change. My father put his hand on her arm. She's not going to respond, he said. She's been gone for 7 years. She's not coming back. But the house? She could have just let the bank take it. Why did she buy it? Why did she make sure we knew? My father was quiet for a long moment. Because she wanted us to know what she's worth, he finally said. She wanted us to see exactly what we lost when we treated her like a debt instead of a daughter. They got in the moving truck. They drove away, and I watched them disappear down the street just like Milwaukee had disappeared through that bus window 7 years ago. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt done. The chapter was closed. The debt, the real debt, the emotional weight I had carried for 22 years was finally paid. Not by me, by them. I kept the house for 2 years. At first, I wasn't sure what to do with it. Selling it felt anticlimactic. Living in it felt impossible. Too many memories, too much pain in those walls. But eventually, I found a purpose for it. I converted 4,847 Maple Street into transitional housing for young adults aging out of the foster care system. Kids who had nowhere to go. Kids who had been told they were worthless. Kids who needed someone to believe in them. I partnered with a local nonprofit to manage the property. I funded renovations to create 4 separate living units, each with a bedroom, bathroom, and small kitchen. I established a scholarship fund to help residents pursue education or job training, and I named it the Phoenix House, because that's what I was, a girl who had been burned, buried, and left for dead, a woman who had risen from the ashes. I visit sometimes when I'm back in Milwaukee. I talk to the residents. I share my story. I tell them that no matter how worthless someone makes them feel, they have value. They have potential. They have futures worth fighting for. Some of them look at me with skepticism. The successful businesswoman in her expensive clothes, talking about poverty and struggle like she understands. But then I show them the ledger. My father's original ledger, the one with the $124,600 written in red ink. I show them the itemized list of what I supposedly owed for being born. I show them what I escaped, and their eyes change. Because they see themselves in those numbers. They see their own families, their own debts, their own impossible situations. And they see that escape is possible, that survival is possible, that success is possible, even when everything and everyone tells you otherwise. 3 years ago, I received a letter from my mother. I don't know how she found my address. I had moved several times since leaving Chicago, eventually settling in Atlanta, where I now run my own real estate investment company. The letter was handwritten, 10 pages, tear-stained in places. It was an apology. Not the kind of apology that makes excuses. Not the kind that says, "I'm sorry you were hurt," instead of, "I'm sorry I hurt you." A real apology. "I was weak," my mother wrote. "Your father controlled everything, the money, the decisions, the narrative of our family. I told myself I was protecting you by staying quiet, but I was just protecting myself. I let him treat you like property because standing up for you would have meant standing up to him, and I was too afraid to do that. There is no excuse for what we did. We stole your childhood. We stole your labor. We stole your sense of worth. We told you that you owed us for existing, when the truth is that we owed you everything and gave you nothing. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. I understand what we did, and I will carry that shame for the rest of my life." She included her phone number, her new address, a small apartment in a suburb of Milwaukee, an invitation to reach out if I ever wanted to talk. I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer. I haven't responded. I'm not sure I ever will. Some wounds don't heal with apologies. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. But knowing she understands, knowing she sees what she did, that means something. Not enough to rebuild a relationship, but enough to let go of some of the anger, enough to move forward. I'm 35 now. I own a real estate investment company with $47 million in assets under management. I employ 23 people, all of whom are paid fairly and treated with dignity. I donate a percentage of every profit to organizations that support homeless youth and young people aging out of foster care. I'm married to a man named Daniel, a social worker who dedicates his life to helping kids from situations like mine. We have a daughter named Grace, who is 4 years old and has never once been told she owes anyone for existing. I hug her every day. I tell her she's loved. I tell her she's worthy. I tell her she matters, not because of what she can do or earn or produce, but because she is, because she exists, because existence itself is enough. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear my father's voice. You owe us for being born. But now, instead of believing it, I answer him. No, I don't owe anyone for being born. My existence is not a debt. My life is not a ledger. I am not something to be collected. I am someone who survived, someone who escaped, someone who built a life worth living from $43 and a bus ticket. And that is worth more than any number my father ever wrote in red ink. If this story resonates with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and whether you've ever had to escape something that tried to own you. Like and subscribe for more stories about survival, freedom, and the truth that your existence is not a debt. You'll come crawling back in a week. That's what my father texted when I escaped with $43 and a bus ticket. For 8 years, he had charged me rent from age 14. He had taken every paycheck I earned. He had told me I owed $147,000 for being born. He thought I was nothing without him. He was wrong. 7 years later, I owned a real estate investment company. 7 years later, I had enough money to buy anything I wanted, so I bought something specific. His house. The house he was about to lose to foreclosure. I bought it. Cash. $287,000, and I sent a real estate agent to deliver the news. The property has been purchased. You have 30 days to vacate. My father asked who bought it. The agent handed him my letter. One sentence. This is what your daughter is worth. One number. $287,000. My mother sat on the floor and cried. My father finally understood what he lost. Not $147,000 in imaginary debt. A daughter who was never worthless, a daughter who built an empire from nothing, a daughter who now owns the house he tried to trap her in. You'll come crawling back in a week. No, Dad, I came back in 7 years, and I didn't crawl. I bought.